Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is my friend Alan Collinge. And Alan, as you know from our previous videos, that he founded Student Loan Justice. Well, over the years, there hasn't been much movement in resolving this problem. So Alan decided to throw his hat into the ring for president of the United States. And hopefully he could solve the problem that way. So, Alan, that was a big move for you. When did you decide to run for president?
Yeah, a very big move, I have to say. So last congressional session, so almost exactly a year ago today, the Democrats in Congress had a really good bankruptcy bill for student loans. We had been fighting for this bill so hard. We filmed a documentary with MSNBC in support of getting this legislation passed. The Democrats had been promising since forever, decades actually, to return bankruptcy rights to student loans. Very fundamental thing. And the Democrats betrayed us. They Senator Dick Durbin decided not to advance the bill, and so that was when the seed of we've got to do something big sort of was put in my mind. Over the ensuing year, this past year, it became clear to me that the Democrats are moving away from the very minimally adequate solution for the student loan problem, which is returning constitutional bankruptcy rights to the loans. Um, they were less interested this past year than they were last session in doing this bill. So I realized that both parties have abandoned us. The Democrats have abandoned us, despite the rhetoric and despite the little pittance of cancellations that Joe Biden likes to point to. Joe Biden could cancel what he's canceled every 3 years forever, and the federal student loan portfolio will still grow by $600 billion every 3 years. So this lending scam, and it is a scam, it's completely failed. Both parties have no intention of actually fixing it, and they have every intention of perpetuating it. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not doing that. I've been fighting for student loan justice for 19 years now, and the only thing within the bounds of the law that I can see to put sufficient pressure on both parties in Congress to get serious about solving this problem is to threaten them in an election. And so here we are. I've got the website I just announced last night, collingeforpresident.com, by the way. And I wouldn't run if I didn't think that I could win, Cynthia. That's the first thing. There are 53 million student loan borrowers and cosigners in the country. Over 40 million of those people are losing sleep over their student loans. So they will never be able to repay their loans. And here's some breaking news you may not realize, and nobody does. In fact, today, 80% of all federal student loan borrowers are not making payments on their loans. The New York Times reported that, very blatantly and errantly reported, that 60% of borrowers were paying. That's false. They didn't include huge tranches of borrowers out there in deferment, etc. In fact, of the 43.4 million student loan borrowers out there, uh, not even 7 million are paying. So this problem, this student loan system in this country is failed. It's finished. It can't continue. So I can only hope that those 40 million people out there, the 35 million who aren't paying, I hope they will find our campaign. We know we can't count on the media to push this because the mainstream corporate media is just totally in bed with one party or the other. I call it the uniparty, and that's fine. So word of mouth is going to be really how this campaign gets off the ground.
So, I'm sure you don't have millions to spend for media, and word of mouth is important. Uh, Besides Facebook, how will you get your message out?
Well, various social media, Twitter, Facebook, all the standard channels. Our email list is pretty big. We've got 1.2 million people on our petition. So I'll probably be utilizing that resource as a way to reach out to large numbers of people. But as I said, there's only so much that we can do. Our funding is extraordinarily limited. Like, we don't have $1 million for media. We don't even have $1,000 for media.
Uh-huh.
Um, but like I said, this is nothing new to us. We've been bumping along the bottom, being ignored and overlooked and disrespected by the mainstream media forever. We've faced this sort of a challenge for pretty much the whole 19 years we've been around. So um, I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll catch fire. And I can only tell everybody out there with student loans, tell everyone you know about collingeforpresident.com. This is the nucleus. Student loan borrowers need to unite because those two parties are not fighting for us, not Trump, not Biden.
Now, have you spoken to any of the Democratic or Republican leadership, and do they know what you're doing?
I talked to Marianne Williamson a couple of weeks ago. I did a podcast with her. I actually did not tell her that I was running. I think she probably won't be particularly pleased. Um, but no, uh, when we have maybe a larger campaign, we have something behind us. Maybe I will re-engage with our colleagues, I guess you could say, in Washington D.C. on both sides of the aisle. Um, but I'm just focused on growing this campaign right now and just making sure that everybody out there within the sound of my voice and much further with student loans will find our campaign and sign up and donate. Even a little bit is perfectly fine. uh, you know Fundraising is nowhere near as big of a thing for this campaign as it is for others. um, but we can't do it on nothing. So I
Mhm.
would hope very, very much that people would understand the value, the true value in this campaign. Because I'm telling you, Cynthia, we are looking down a very bleak and dismal path with either the D's or the R's in charge at this point. It's just, to me, it's just a complete facade.
As of right now, if you were not in the race, you do not see a resolution to this problem.
No, absolutely not. Nope. We're looking at another older, tireder election, a rehash of 2020. And look, Donald Trump had 4 years to do what he was going to do on student loans.
Huh?
Joe Biden has had 3 years to do what he was going to do on student loans. And we've seen what they will do. And what they will do is nothing unless they absolutely have to. Trump was kind of forced into that repayment pause just because of the COVID pandemic. Um, Biden made all sorts of promises before the election in 2020 about how he was going to cancel student loans, about eliminate student loans. He even said for many people, and also probably more importantly, return bankruptcy protections to the loans. And here we are 3 years later. Neither of those things have happened. And again, the loan cancellations that Biden is bragging about, those are loans that should have been canceled by law years or decades ago. And it's a tiny fraction of the interest that clicks off every year, $100 billion. So, yeah, student loan borrowers out there need to know that neither party is going to help. Both parties are going to hurt us. The dark forces in Washington, D.C. that are protecting this loan scam have won at this point. And no matter whether we see a Biden or a Trump in office in November, when the election in November, it's going to be very bleak and dismal for everyone. The founding fathers felt very strongly about predatory lending. They called for uniform bankruptcy rights in the Constitution. And the one defining feature that's important about federal student loans is that they have been uniquely stripped of this very important protection. That's not coming back under Biden. It's not going to come back under Trump for all that I can tell. Not in the current political dynamics, certainly. Now, if our campaign gains significant steam and we can maybe start showing up in some of the polls. Fundraising would be great, but that's kind of secondary. Maybe then we'll have some real pressure that we can put on both parties, quite frankly, Democrats and Republicans, to finally, at a minimum, get bankruptcy rates returned to the loans. And when that happens, that's pretty much game over for the federal student loan program. They're going to have to cancel loans very broadly, very deeply, maybe even totally when the right of bankruptcy is returned. That's how failed this lending program is, Cynthia. It's just so far over the cliff. There's no words.
Over the past year, as I've done interviews, I've learned a lot about the military industrial complex. And there's millions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money in the military industrial complex that's going to Ukraine, that's going to Gaza. But here, 40 something million Americans are hurting because they cannot pay their student loan debt back. Can you talk about that? Why, on the one hand, are we spending so much money on armament and defense and war, and at the same time, poor poor people who are young, who could uh, contribute to the economy by buying a house, buying a car, and they don't have the money to do that. What's
You know,
going
if you're asking me to justify it or explain it, I truly can't, Cynthia. It is outrageous and obscene. $7 trillion into Iraq and Afghanistan, and that seems to be only continuing, maybe on a lesser scale, on a smaller scale, with the current regional conflicts we're seeing around the world. It makes no sense, and I don't want to talk about other issues beyond student loans too much right now. I'll be rolling
okay?
out an agenda, but I can tell you it certainly includes across the board discretionary spending cuts, 10, 15, 20% across the board. I would like to emphasize wasteful military spending that goes overseas. I've been to Iraq as a contractor, not as a serviceman, but I've been to the Middle East. I've worked in and around the military for years. I've seen the outrageous spending of taxpayer dollars. The pallets. I haven't seen the pallets personally, but the pallets of $100 bills and so forth. That's just outrageous. It makes zero sense. And we can talk about pretty much every federal agency you can point to, and I will show you an agency whose budget can be trimmed by 10, if not 20% in what they spend every year.
Mm.
Um, I think that's fiscally prudent and it's long overdue. Uh, well, maybe I'll say one other thing to balance that in my campaign. Maybe the first priority beyond student loans in my campaign is going to be to tax the very, very, very wealthy, the wealthiest 1% in this country. They have turned this economic system of ours into an ATM machine over the past 40 years, and they have got to pay their fair share. Before World War II, after World War II, our debt, our national debt, quintupled. So it went up by about 500%. Between, say, in the past, just this century, between 2000 and 2024, our debt has similarly quintupled. It's gone up by 500%. After World War II, they rose the tax rate for the wealthiest individuals and corporations to over 90%. I think that's precisely what this country has to see. Got to see it. That's precisely what the wealthy elite and the media, people who own the media, absolutely don't want us talking about. And I'm not some blue-haired liberal, I'm not a liberal person. My campaign will be both conservative and liberal. We're going to be drawing from each party, the best from both parties. So nobody can accuse me of being a socialist or a fascist. I think my agenda will be very balanced. And quite frankly, I think a lot of sitting politicians in Congress are envious because they are so shackled to the corpse that is their respective political party, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans. They have to toe the line on a whole bunch of disgusting, terrible issues that are just stupid. They're they are shackled to a corpse, and I say that about both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I think the American people get it. They see the nonsense on TV. They can smell the fakery, and I think people, certainly the 40 million student loan borrowers out there in the country, may very well be willing to finally reject the dogma and the propaganda coming from both parties and just do what they feel is best. And that would be voting for Collinge for president.
So, what you just articulated, you're stepping on some pretty big toes, and there's going to be a lot of pushback. What do you say to that?
Well, I say good. I'm not saying what everybody else isn't thinking. Right now, I'm sort of an ant on an elephant, but I can only tell people, this two-party system is not healthy for this country at this point.
Right.
Both parties have become far more trouble than they're worth. No, no, and Marianne Williamson was right. I'm sort of sorry that she's running as a Democrat, quite frankly, but nowhere in the Constitution are Democrats or Republicans mentioned. In a presidential election year, only 1.5% of the population actually donates money to the Democrats or the Republicans or their candidates. That's like 3 million people controlling our nation's politics. And I'm sorry, but that's just not acceptable. And any rational person should come to the same conclusion.
So, statistic, there's what, 45 million Americans with student debt now?
Well, there's about 53, 54, maybe 55 million if you include private student loans and co-signers, maybe even a little more.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
very large number, and in last election year, 160 million people voted, so 80 million for each party. 40 million votes is nothing to sneeze at. But with RFK in the race now as an independent, if he's a significant draw, we're talking about a three-man race with me in it in a perfect world, assuming that we reach all the student loan borrowers that we need to reach. We're talking about a four-man race. And I don't know how many people are going to vote in this coming election. I tend to think it might be a bit fewer than 160 million people. But 40 million votes can win that election.
Mhm.
Um, so student loan borrowers, particularly distressed student loan borrowers, so people who will never be able to repay their loans, we are the largest politically untethered voting bloc in modern U.S. history.
Now, yesterday when I called you and asked you if you were interested in doing an interview, and then I talked about, well, the Green Party is for forgiveness for student loans, and your reaction was that you're not left or right, but you'll cover all political spectrum, right?
Yeah, that seems to be the big drawback for the third parties that we've seen over the years, including the Green Party. I would probably say that, yeah, certainly the People's Party, other parties, libertarians. They're too fringy. They're too off to one side or another, and they just all they tend to do is take away from the party they're closest to. So Democrats just can't stand Ralph Nader. I love Ralph Nader, by the way, and I just don't think that formula will ever work. All it will do is piss off one party or the other. Uh, so yeah, my agenda would not be appropriate for the Green Party. I'm going to be pretty tough on the border. I'm going to be very tough on China, for example. And so yeah, I just think, at least strategically, reaching out and it doesn't make me moderate to be taking issues from both the Republicans and the Democrats. I just think that's the wrong terminology. It just makes my agenda hopefully acceptable. So, sort of my goal is that all of the distressed student loan borrowers out there, um, they won't agree with everything in my platform, but they'll be able to live with it. I think most people at this point understand that it's pretty rational to enforce the immigration laws that are on the books. It makes a lot of sense to tax the wealthy, like a lot. At the same time, it makes a lot of sense to trim, I would say, cut government spending. And so, you know, um, that to me is a pretty moderate um, campaign platform. I mean, but as I said, moderate, left, right, I don't know. All I know is I'm doing what I think is best, and I think that most of the student loan borrowers out there will at least be able to live with my agenda. I love my agenda, by the way. I think a lot of people will be like, "Yeah, obviously," um, but that remains to be seen.
So how many people, in your estimation, would be a one issue vote? How many
Well,
people would vote for somebody with just one issue?
Well, I think every distressed student loan borrower, and that's literally 40 million people if you include private student loans. These are people who they've either stopped paying, and that's like 80% of all federal student loan borrowers, or they're paying and paying and paying, but their loan balances are going up. Those people, I guarantee you that student loans is top of mind for them. Now, obviously, um, I have to consider the other issues, and so my strategy is as I laid it out. But I think people that are losing sleep over their student loans are willing to accommodate a lot of things in order to see the student loan problem finally solved. Maybe I should say, Cynthia, as president, my student loan agenda is simple. I will cancel every nickel of federally owned student loans by executive order. That's a concept that I started actually with the petition at change.org. I will do that. I will return bankruptcy rights to all student loans, federal and private, all the student loans that the president cannot cancel by executive order. I will replace the federal student loan program. I mean, this sucker is all bathwater and no baby at this point. I will task Congress to come up with an alternative higher education funding model, hopefully one that doesn't include student loans, uh, um, hopefully one that is rational and rationally priced, and one that cuts the fat out for the colleges. In other words, puts the colleges on a very significant diet. They are way overfunded. And then finally, I'm going to hold the colleges financially accountable for this disaster. They need to be compelled to, I think, reimburse the federal government for any shortfall after the cancellation happens. Um, and I don't think there will be a huge shortfall for the government. I think the government has made a huge amount of money from this loan scam over many years. But whatever the government may be short, I think the colleges need to pony up and pay the difference.
So, the student loan debt crisis has been going on for many years, right? So,
Since the 70s, arguably.
okay, since the 70s. So that's 50 years. In those 50 years, why didn't any member of Congress, any senator, stepped up to the plate and say, this is wrong? Why hasn't it been done?
I asked myself the same question. All the experts in Washington D.C., all the analysts, all the people at the Treasury Department, all the people at the Department of Education, they saw this catastrophe coming from years or decades coming. They totally knew that what is happening today was going to happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I'm not going to speak for those people. There's no defending it. We've seen all sorts of rhetoric all throughout the decades and years. But when important things were on the table to actually solve this problem, like last congressional session, returning bankruptcy to the loans, all of a sudden there's always a reason. Oh, now is not a good time. Now is not a good time to return constitutional bankruptcy rights to the loans. They were saying, ever since I started student loan justice in 2005, I was getting that retort from Washington, D.C. Now's not a good time. Now's not a good time. Well, apparently, it's never a good time to fix this bloated, uh, unconstitutional, unconscionable loan scam if you live and work in Washington, D.C. So we're at the point, literally, Cynthia, where the citizens have to shut this lending program down by the popular unconsent. And that's happening. As I said, 80% of everybody is not paying today, now that they've turned the loans back on. And I think that's going to only increase over time, not get better in terms of the number of the percentage of payers.
Why do you think that the legislators in Washington, D.C. have been deaf to your calls?
Well, I think they're corrupted. I think they have no desire or intention of actually fixing this problem. I think they're under pressure from the banks, unspoken, sort of silent pressure from the Department of Education. And quite frankly, the colleges have silently but firmly had their thumb on the scale against any changes. The Department of Education, the colleges, all the interested parties, except for the borrowers, are they love this current situation. They're getting paid way more than enough. The money's flowing in. They don't want to jeopardize that. It's the swamp, protecting the swamp, and you know it can only go on for so long. Lending systems fail from time to time, but for the bad politics in Washington D.C., the federal student loan program would have been taken to the bath and drowned in the tub probably 10 or 15 years ago. But here we are.
Well, Joe Biden, you know, with his talk about student forgiveness, right? He's the one, he's the architect of this whole problem, being from Delaware.
Among all living, serving politicians in the United States, Cynthia, Joe Biden literally deserves the most credit of anyone in the country for the student loan scam. As a junior senator in the 70s, he was a surprisingly key guy in legislation that initially started restricting bankruptcy rights. In 2005, he was pretty much the main guy, the head guy honchoing the removal of bankruptcy rights from private student loans. And I'm sorry, but he's a nice guy and everything. But Joe Biden is just completely at the beck and call of the dark forces in Washington D.C., who, quite frankly, would love to conquer and enslave the country in debt. And I can tell you, if what happened to student loans is allowed to stand, those very same dark forces, they will find ways to extend that financial tyranny across all consumer debt. I hear whispers in Washington, D.C. all the time about making medical debt similarly non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, credit cards, auto loans, small business loans. There's nowhere that ends. And that's precisely what the founding fathers didn't want when they called for uniform bankruptcy laws, aka rights, in the Constitution. We don't need to put up with this nonsense. I hope everybody out there who's watching this with student loans will understand. We do not have to put up with this.
So if let's say you won the presidency and you cancel student debt, then people with medical bills, with credit card bill, they're going to come to you and say, do what you did for me with student loan debt. How would you answer that?
Well, unfortunately, Cynthia, the president does not have the power to cancel loans that the federal government does not own. So the federal government is the lender for 90% of student loan debt. They own the loans. They've already made their money back on the loans. They can cancel the loans. There are a few other types of loans that the federal government does own, direct federal loans. Um, I believe there's some in Small Business Administration. I think there's some FEMA loans that the federal government owns. There are a few others. Student loans is the very large percentage of government held debt. Um, but certainly as president, I would look at every loan that the federal government holds, and if I see similar abuse, like the abuse that we have seen with student loans, yeah, I will. And assuming there's a legal basis to do so, as there is in the Higher Education Act for student loans, yeah, I would certainly be open to canceling the debts.
So have you discussed with Marianne Williamson, and maybe a couple of other people will contact you? Have you uh, thought about debates? Because I don't.
I'm willing to debate anyone, anytime, anywhere. I will talk with any and all media. Um, I've been sharpening this blade for 19 years now, Cynthia. So
Okay.
I'm very happy to go into any lion's den or friendly circumstance and plead the case. Uh, as far as I'm concerned, we can't lose. I can't lose. But getting onto the dance floor is, of course, where the swamp exerts their influence. We probably never hear the best politicians out there in the country just because of the power structure and how that works. But I say screw the power structure. We have the internet now. People, at least in theory, should be able to assemble across the country electronically. Uh, um, and so, we can cut out the middleman. We don't need as I said, we don't need the media. We don't need secret handshakes, and we don't need to pay people off in various places to get our message out. As long as the citizens, the people out there, the student loan borrowers, understand that the power resides completely in them, um, then screw the system. we we don't need the media. We don't need other you know I would love to. I would love to be invited to any and all debates, but that remains. That's. I would be surprised if that happened.
Right. I'm surprised if there will be debates, period. I don't think there will be.
I mean, the primary process this year is just a complete joke. They're kicking Marianne Williamson off the primary ballots in Florida. They're trying to kick Donald Trump off the ballots. It's just nonsense. Um, both parties are just. I'm telling you that they are dying giants. They are. We're looking at some kind of a zombie parade with this election, and you if you if you really want to protect democracy, probably the best thing to do is start turning away from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Hmm.
I think that's the best way to protect and preserve democracy at this point. And I can only hope that a lot of people out there they understand the intellectual merit in that statement.
So I'm sure that you you would like, or I should say, I'd like to invite you on anytime you want to talk about issues and how your campaign is going. Would that be okay?
I would love that, Cynthia. Hopefully, we'll have something really good and big to talk about in the weeks and months to come.
Okay, so give out your contact information.
It's collingeforpresident.com. Collinge. Hopefully, you can put a link up to it because nobody knows how to spell that. Collingeforpresident.com.
Okay, great. So, Alan, good luck. We'll be talking again. And thank you everybody for listening. Have a great day. And
Thank you,
if you
Cynthia.
and if you do have a student loan, please consider everything that Alan talked about. Um, we'll speak again soon.